Welcome back to the Financial Self-Care Club, Shannon.
Hi, Christy.
I'm so excited you're here, and we're continuing the conversation around money mindset and ways to bust through our limiting beliefs and the things that are holding us back and start to create a relationship with money that feels good and abundant and is serving us in our pursuit of our dreams. And so with that, we are tackling kind of a heavy topic today,
Yes.
but something that's common, and I think as humans all experience this as at some point in our journeys. And we're talking about shame.
Yeah, we got to unpack that.
My heart's feeling heavy just speaking the word, right? It's a big one, and it's an important one to start to unpack. So let's start just by talking a little bit more about like what shame is and how we can start to identify if that is something that we're struggling with.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about how that shows up for people too, because after we define it, I don't think most people walk around immediately acknowledging that they have shame around their money, but there are some telltale signs that we can get into to help people figure that out. So I really love the definition that Brene Brown has about shame. So I think I'll refer back to that because I use it so often. So she defines shame as the fear that there's something about us that makes us unworthy of being in connection.
Ooh.
I.e., when you've got shame, you feel like you're isolated on an island, the only one inhabiting that island, and it's not a pleasant feeling.
Mm-mm.
So there's something less than or wrong with you that would then separate you from other people.
Wow. Yeah, that one definitely feels big, but also, it's relatable. I've definitely been there, and I, maybe haven't in the past always felt as comfortable even sharing that or speaking about that, right? Talking about this is a big struggle too, but as you mentioned, kind of like that's how we can know more of what it is. But tell us more about how it shows up and how we can identify it.
Right. So the way that you can look at it is there are shame triggers, things that will send you almost like you take the ship and you go over to that island where you're inhabiting it by yourself. So think about all the things in your life that come up, since we're here to talk about money. What sends you into that place of feeling like, gosh, I am the only one that is dealing with this? Credit card debt, student loans, excuse me.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. Maybe you had a launch in your business and it didn't really go well, or you went up for a raise and you didn't get it. Think about what it is for you that you would say triggers you to that place of feeling really alone.
Yeah. And I see this with clients all the time is they're coming to me and they're saying, I have this credit card debt and I'm a big failure and I screwed up and I'm a mess. And that's kind of that is reflecting back to me what you mentioned with shame being that feeling of being a bad person or doing something wrong. It's that connection of shame with your
Identity.
Worth, right? Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. And it's a very kind of like a hairline distinction between shame and guilt. So guilt is like if you had maybe you had a shopping addiction in the past and you would go and spend a lot of money when you were feeling down about yourself and you'd go buy yourself things to make you feel better. That's a habit, an action that you were taking that was kind of maybe a destructive behavior in your estimation, and it led to a lot of credit card debt. But it's the action itself that you feel guilty that you partook in that action. Shame, on the other hand, is taking that experience and making it part of your identity. Like, I'm bad with money, or I'm lazy and I don't work hard enough. Those statements are, I'm a mess because all this evidence of how you mishandled money. But when you, instead of just focusing on the behavior, if you notice that you're saying things that are like associated with your identity, who you are as a person, and maybe you even notice, I've seen this happen a lot. people say it in a very like self-deprecating, humorous way. Like, oh, I'm horrible with money. Like, don't give me a gift card because then I'll just go crazy. And we make it part of our normal conversation. You can maybe pick up on that in other people and in yourself to know that you've got a shame trigger there that you're deeply personally identifying with being bad with money. And that's a lot harder to change your identity than your behaviors and your habits.
Yeah. Because then you have also just a lot of like your soul is wrapped up in it. You're not looking at it. I feel like if you've identified it as a habit or something you want to change and improve, you can look at it maybe more objectively and be in that headspace where you can come up with solutions and you can take action. But when you're feeling like it's, you know, a part of your being and your worth as a human, that burden of that feeling and that emotion and that shame can really take over and prevent you from moving forward. Do you find that when people are in shame, it is hard to get into that place of finding solutions and taking action and really achieving your goals?
Yes, it is hard for a lot of people. And the way I describe it often is like you're standing at the base of a mountain and you're looking up at the summit. And if you're in the shameful place, you're saying, man, I'm never somebody who could get to the top of that mountain. Like, here I am stuck at the bottom, just surrounded by other people who are also stuck here, let's say. But the person who then shifts into the mode of, you know what, I've made some choices about how I handle my money in the past that I'm not really that happy with because it's led to credit card debt. Well, then I'm going to take the first step. And they actually begin the hike up the mountain to do the work on their relationship with money. That's the person who's switched it over from shame to guilt. And they're able to start looking at their behaviors and say, the result that I'm getting is I'm now $50,000 in credit card debt. And that's from trying to launch this business and repeatedly having it not work out, plus my shopping addiction, plus my student loan debt. Okay, well, now I want to take an action step because I recognize that result is making me feel really overburdened and weighed down and stressed out and anxious. So how do I begin to change my actions that led to this result? The person who is able to do that, that's when you start to shift over and be more proactive. Whereas the person who's like, I'm just destined, like I'm a horrible person with money. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a mess. Well, how likely is that person to feel motivated to change? I mean, it's so defeating to take that perspective from the beginning. So if we can like have someone else tell us, hey, I believe in you, you know, like remember that you just have some habits that haven't been helpful and you're capable of changing them. Like you are so much bigger than your habits. Your identity and your worth are intact. Let's just change these actions.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Because it's just a different headspace from which you can take action and you can move forward and you feel better throughout the day because you can recognize that as something outside and separate of yourself. And I want to hear more about the person who decides to climb the wall, but I do have one more question about the person who's kind of stuck at the bottom there. You know, we know that shame is this feeling that's kind of digging into your worth about how you are interacting with money, the choices you're making, whatever it is. And we know that it's different with guilt and there's a shift to make there, but how do we know if we are experiencing shame, right? Like we know what shame sounds like, but that doesn't always mean that we're aware of it. Or maybe we've recently learned what shame looks like and we haven't dug through all the layers of recognizing it. Talk to us about that process of gaining awareness.
Yeah. So the telltale sign I would say is if you notice that you're kind of living this double life where you're aware that you've got credit card debt or you are behind on other payments, but you go out into the world and at brunch with your friends, you're not really talking about that. In fact, you're making it a point to not talk about that at all.
Pushing it down.
Yeah, you're out there like, oh yeah, I'll come to brunch and I'm going to do the bottomless mimosas and I'll get you the fabulous birthday gift and let's go on this trip. And like you're outwardly desperate to connect with people. So you put up this front, like everything's fine with my finances. And then secretly when you get home and you lay on the couch, you're like, oh, here it is again, like another notice in the mail, more envelopes I haven't opened. Like that silence around what it is you're challenged with about your money is a really prominent sign that there's probably some money shame at play. And I want to make this point too, which is that we all have money shame.
Yes.
Like we give money so much importance in our lives that it's kind of hard not to have a certain degree of shameful feelings about money, like wishing that you handled it differently, let's say. So pretending that things are okay on the outside and really being secretly worried about it, that double life is probably the number one sign that I see in my clients when they have that money shame.
Definitely. That's huge. And I see that a lot too. Maybe whether it's couples, I'm talking to one partner and that partner is hiding some credit card debt from the other partner, or they almost feel like they have this dirty little secret and they don't want to tell anyone. They kind of want to take care of it and then, maybe go to their partner from there, or they're at the brunch and they're not telling their friends as they're racking up more expenses, but really trying to pay off debt at the same time. And just that feeling of kind of carrying around that dirty secret, it's heavy.
It's really heavy. A kind of a funny aside story is that the first time that I ever had credit card debt, I remember my credit card got declined and I called Bank of America and got connected to customer service. And the lady was like, well, yeah, honey, your card was declined because, you're over the limit. And this is the first time. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is how this works. I guess, and I said it out loud to her, stream of consciousness. I said something like, wow, I'm going to need to talk to my husband and let him know about this. And she was like, girl, man, you're a better person than most people I talk to. They just would keep it quiet and not say anything. And I remember my jaw kind of dropping at that notion, because it's this thing that we all kind of grapple with, but it is hard to speak it. Like intention in my heart, I was like, I wouldn't want to hide this from him. But that's a totally different thing than the actual sitting down and having the conversation about it. So the silence is a big sign that, you got some shame stuff to work through.
Yeah, like definitely. We all do. I've had dirty little money secrets that I haven't wanted to tell anybody. And when I finally did, I was like, oh, okay, actually that felt really good to get off my chest. But, as you're going through it, it really, and that's affecting your feelings of worth.
Yes.
And your ability. For me, it showed up a lot around, hitting revenue goals in my business when I didn't hit those, which a lot of times they were kind of unrealistic, massive numbers anyway. I wasn't giving myself a chance here, but then I wouldn't hit it. And the shame would pour in. I'm a bad business person. Am I really meant to be doing this? Am I serving?
I don't belong
anything?
here.
Like
other people are reaching their goals. I mean, that conversation around going back to Brene Brown's definition of shame and that fear that you have something about you that's going to disconnect you from other people. That's why people stay quiet. They don't go to brunch feeling comfortable to say, guys, I'm struggling. Like I'm behind 3 cycles on my credit card bill. I've only been able to pay the minimum payment. Like no one says that. Not no one, but it's very rare that people have a circle of friends where they feel comfortable to say that, because guess what? If they said that to their friends, they're worried that their friends are going to then leave that brunch and start a group text chain and be like, don't invite Shelly to brunch. She's behind on her credit card bill. Like, sucks for her. People are worried that they're going to become excluded and isolated, and they already feel so burdened by it that thought of not even being able to like go out and fake it at brunch, not being able to have that connection opportunity makes them really scared. So they put up a front.
Wow. Yeah. That when you put it that way, no wonder people don't want to share, because the fear is losing the connection and being on that, isolation island. And if that's the fear, then of course you don't want to share, because nobody wants that.
Right. And then the bringing this full circle, the ironic part about that is more than one other person at that table, more than just you, are worried about money.
Oh yeah.
Like if you looked around the whole restaurant at brunch, there are plenty of people there who are in the same exact boat.
It's true. We just
But we
don't
don't
talk
talk about
about it. We wouldn't know.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know. You and I who have a little sneak peek insider's look to know that these are super common and normal feelings that everyone experiences. So that's another great point to kind of sink in and take away. You mentioned how this is common and this is normal and it's okay to
Yeah.
have these feelings.
Absolutely. That's a very powerful statement in and of itself. Like you are not alone, no matter how much that negativity bias in your brain wants you to think that you're the only one grappling with this. Mm-hmm. The reality and the truth of it is that more people are challenged by not hitting their revenue numbers or feeling like they're never going to get out of their credit card debt. And it's just the silence only makes it last longer. And I think you kind of have to reality check yourself and say, how true is it really that I'm the only one? How true is it really that people are going to, not want me at the brunch table because I'm dealing with this? And you know what? If that actually pans out and happens to be true, then are those the people you deep down truly want to be connecting with?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you maybe need to make some other changes around who you're having brunch with? And that's a whole nother thing that just, it intimidates people because when you're in your 30s, it is hard to make friends. It's not like you have this automatic community around you like you did in high school and college. You're out there on your own. Maybe you're with a partner, maybe you're single, but creating that community, you kind of stick with the friends you already have. So the idea of losing them feels even scarier.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. This is such great stuff and a lot of great insight into what it feels like and identifying when you are that person who is at the bottom of that rock in whatever particular money issue you're dealing with. So we know things like recognizing that silence and that feeling of keeping a secret.
Yes.
We are identifying triggers. We kind of know what it sounds like in our head in terms of I am not good enough, bad person, failure, making that script about yourself and your worth as opposed to a habit or an action that you can change outside of yourself. So that's some amazing stuff for kind of awareness and understanding where you are today, right? The other side of that now is climbing that mountain and being that person who has the courage and the bravery and the willingness to put in the work to overcome that shame and get to the other side.
Yes.
So let's talk about that journey. How can you start to overcome and heal through those money shame feelings?
Okay, well.
Big question.
One thing that immediately comes to mind is shame cannot survive being spoken. This goes back to Brené Brown's work, right? So if we actually shine a little flashlight on it, and maybe that doesn't immediately feel comfortable. In fact, it most likely doesn't, because we've been sitting here talking about how scary that is and all the irrational fears we have. But how do you start to get your little flashlight, put a battery in, turn the light on, and decide that you're going to shine it? That could be as simple as listening to this conversation, hitting pause where we talked about shame triggers, and writing down for yourself the things about your own finances that make you feel small, disconnected, like you don't belong, and unworthy. What are your, quote, shame triggers?
Yes.
And then when you think about that skyrocketing debt or being behind on your other payments, how does that actually make you feel? So it could just be you sitting down with a notebook and shining a little light on that. Or if you feel comfortable and you want to seek some help outside of your journal, you can go reach out to a professional like me or talk to Christy about your money so that you can begin having someone else help to show you that you are not alone. Because we can sit here and say that all day long, but until you have someone on the other end of the phone who hears everything that you feel anxious and worried about and then mirrors it back to you in a way that really is a heartfelt acknowledgement that there's not something wrong with you. You're not on isolation island. This is a very common challenge people grapple with because we're not taught at a young age how to deal with money. So it's only natural that we're going to like develop some habits that aren't working for us.
Yeah.
So bringing it into the light in a way that feels good for you, whether it's journaling with yourself in your notebook, talking to a professional, or finding a community of like-minded women. And how do you start to do that? Because I know that's going to be people's question. Well, it starts with normalizing the conversation around money. So perhaps you're going to be the one that takes that vulnerable step forward to be the one who says at brunch what's really going on when someone asks, how are you doing? Instead of the generic, so busy, all these things are happening, oh my gosh, this and that. It's like, well, yes, and back on a statement about, and I've also been really stressed about my finances.
Yeah. I love that.
See what happens. Like,
put it out there.
Put it out there. You lead by the example. Like Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in this world.
Yes.
Choose to see that vulnerability, that exercise of vulnerability as a strength in your character, as opposed to like a weakness that you need help and you're broken. Instead, it's like you could be giving someone else permission, even if it's the person walking by your brunch table who happens to overhear you saying that.
Yes.
Or the people that you're sitting with at brunch. Like, imagine if you could lift that weight off your own shoulders and give permission to someone else to also share their challenges. It's a win-win.
I love that. I love all of that. It's shining the light.
Shining the light.
Then you can deal with it in a number and heal with it and work through it in a number of different ways. You can get real intimate with your journal and pour it out all out on the pages. You can go to a professional who, isn't maybe you can go to your friends and that's great too, but maybe that's not your next step if you're still feeling a little bit scared about that. Maybe it's going to a professional and a coach, working through it a little bit and then going to your friends or whatever. There's no right or wrong. There's just options and different scenarios for different personalities and people.
Yes,
but there's the point is there's a wider range, right? There's ways to shine that light and get that support, whether it's through journaling, friends and family, communities of like-minded people. That's been huge for me. I find that I do most of my sharing in those intimate circles of fellow women business owners, because I know that they get it. And a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be focused on improving their mindset and facing their fears and are very growth oriented. So those tend to be more normal conversations in those circles, right? I might not have them as much in my college circle of friends or whatever, but it's finding those pockets of support is what I'm taking away from what you're saying.
Yeah. And here's another thing that you kind of briefly mentioned a few minutes ago, which is willingness to do the work. So huge. That's a big thing we don't want to skip over, because as intimidating as this all sounds and, as scary as it is, like, what's really scarier than 6 months go by and nothing has changed? You think it's bad now, but like if this stays in silence for 6 months or 6 days or whatever kind of dire states you're in, it can only get worse by keeping it quiet.
Into that.
But you have to feel comfortable with at least taking that next step and being willing to explore what that leads to in order to start to shift your own, energy around it. Because if you're wallowing in like, why me? This sucks. I'm the only one dealing with this. Nobody else is going to understand it. That's not being in the headspace of wanting to change. So the pain of not changing, so the pain of keeping things status quo for 6 more months, that has to be greater. It has to get to the point where that pain is bigger than the pain of making the change.
Love that. Yes.
And if you're not at that point yet, then you're just going to stay where you're at. And not judging that. I'm just saying, don't beat yourself up if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, why me? And this isn't fair. Okay. You're not quite there yet. Something has to happen sometimes for us to realize, like, now's the time to change. Something has to become so painful in how it is today, and the idea of it staying that way has to, we have to perceive that as more challenging than going through with taking that vulnerable step at brunch.
Oh yeah. I am definitely resonating with that, because I've let things get way too painful and haven't sought help or haven't taken action to make a change, stayed stuck. And the moment that I start to put it out there and think about it and work on it and increase my awareness and talk to people about it, and maybe I'm hiring people to help or whatever that process has looked like. But as soon as you're willing, I love that. And I feel like another piece of that is maybe also, and let me know if you see this with clients and people going through this journey, is kind of like the belief that like you can do it and it's possible. Like, do you see that is kind of a blocker for people? Like they maybe don't actually really believe that they can make that shift, so they don't go into that place of doing the action.
Yeah, if you're stuck in the mindset of, I don't have what it takes, I don't know enough, I'm not experienced enough, I've always been this way, so I don't really have hope that I'm going to be able to change. That comes up often. And that's where the help of having somebody who's the objective third party outside of your own experience, like Christy or myself as a coach, that's very helpful to have someone on the other end of the phone helping you to see that just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean that's the way that you always have to do it going forward. And I think where this gets really hard for people is, I notice this a lot in talks about like burnout and overwhelm. Just to like shift gears really quickly, a lot of people who reach a certain level of success and have done it by pushing themselves and overstretching, they feel like, but this is how I did it up until here. So in order to reach the next level of success, I have to keep doing that.
Yes.
Just because that's what you did to get here doesn't mean that that's going to be what gets you to the next level. So I think with your money, that also applies. You are capable of finding a new way to do it. But sometimes if you don't believe it yourself, it is helpful to have a person outside of you to tap you on the shoulder and be like, you got this. Like, I'm going to hold the belief in you because I know that you're capable. Just because you've been doing it this way all along, just because XYZ factors, at any point you can choose to make that mindset shift to say, I used to do it that way, but starting today, I'm doing it this way.
Yes. And that it's a choice. That feels so empowering.
Right. And you're not choosing to change who you are, which feels like a very daunting thing. You're choosing to change what you're doing, your behaviors, which ultimately will then, shift your identity and help you become the business owner or the professional that you can be versus the one that you are today. But it's a lot easier for our brain to get behind our change if it sees it as a behavioral habit change, like something bite-sized that I can start doing today. Sitting down with my journal once a week, reaching out to, go on Instagram and start following Christy or myself for inspiration. Those are the little nuggets that you can start doing. And, you'd be surprised where that can lead to you starting to feel like, you know what, maybe I am capable of creating this change either on my own or with a professional's help.
Yeah. Just taking those next best steps, little things that feel fun and joyful and easy, yet add up and culminate. I love that. I think that's such a great takeaway, is that, just start and it can be super simple and super fun and super, you can make it light and as light as you can. Sometimes working through these emotional topics that I don't want to skirt over, that's going to be, hard work, but you can approach it in a way that feels as good as possible and how you want to do it.
Yeah. And noticing like what it is you hope to feel as you work through and shift some of your habits around your finances. Like, sure, the feeling you've got today of being worried, overwhelmed, anxious feels very much like this is how I'm always going to feel about money.
Oh yeah.
But if you were to kind of experiment and say, well, what if I give myself some permission and some room to dream here? what would I really like to wake up and feel about my money, you know, when my credit card bill is due every month, and start to map that out as a way to say, now I can get excited about this. Because that's the other thing. I think when this feels too daunting, people are like, oh, keep that away from me. I don't want to talk about that. I'll just keep it quiet.
No thanks.
But you can make it exciting by starting to imagine what it could feel like, what's possible. And again, that's where an expert comes into play, because you can look to an expert and say, oh, wow, like she's an example of somebody who is living in alignment with how she wants to feel about her money. And I could do that too. Like it's a hopefulness that could come over you to motivate your action.
This is so good. So many good insights for awareness, for working through it. I have one final question for you before we go.
Okay.
People who are doing the work, right? They're showing up, they're journaling, they have support systems, they're doing whatever it is along their journey to feel better and release that shame. If they're not getting maybe the results they want right away, and they're feeling upset about it, and they're feeling behind, and they're wanting to give up, and they're just struggling to kind of stay that course, what advice would you have for that person?
I'm not sure if it's really advice, but one thing I would most definitely want to say to them is you're exactly where you're meant to be in the process.
Yes.
You're not doing it wrong. As Christy said, there's no one right or wrong way to go about this journey. We all have unique things that need to be worked through and learned on our own journeys. And you can't really rush that. It's just going to come in its own time. So just because you might feel like it's not working, I guarantee that what you're doing is working. And it has more to do with your definition of what you claim as it's working or it's not working.
Yes.
So really sitting down and asking yourself, like, how am I judging my experience? What is it that I'm seeing in my results that isn't adding up? And then there was one other thing I was going to say about this. Either choosing a new definition of what's working and what's not that helps you to see your progress along the way.
Love that.
There was one other thing. I just lost my train of thought. Let me see if it comes back.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's great. I think that's such a good takeaway to leave with, is that you're exactly where you need to be right now on your journey.
Yeah.
And I like to think about this in the sense of like, I'm where I need to be because what I need to learn hasn't to in order to grow and get to that next level, it hasn't come yet. So I'm here for a reason, and I'm waiting for that lesson and that learning and that thing that's gonna allow me to make that next breakthrough and get to that next level. And I think that's a super important thing, because I ask because I tend to get overly results oriented, and I don't always focus on the process.
That's what I was gonna say.
We got it.
Like, find the little wins in the process and celebrate the fact that you even recognize. Okay, celebrate the fact that you're sitting down right now watching this video.
Yes.
That in and of itself, I define as a win.
It is, because you're already listening and absorbing more concepts and just learning and growing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just because it doesn't feel like we're having an actual conversation, like hearing exactly what you're challenged by, you're listening to this and you're integrating some of what we're talking about. That in and of itself is a win.
Yes.
And then choosing, to enjoy how you experience the process. It's not always going to feel like fun, lighthearted, easy. Yeah. But if you can encourage yourself to say, like, as long as I keep showing up little by little each day, it's going to add up to big change. Because guess what? You're not walking around with your head in the sand anymore. Nope. You've like popped your head out of the sand. And you're deciding, like, I'm willing to pay attention to this. And that is way more powerful than we sometimes, trick ourselves into thinking. Like, don't underestimate the simple steps that you show up consistently to do. They're adding up, and you're in exactly the right place right now.
They really do. And even if you've been on the journey for even a couple months or years or whatever, thinking back to where you were before, that for me, that always works as a good reminder of, oh, I am making progress.
Yeah, looking at yourself over different periods in time, making a little timeline and saying,
Yeah.
okay, back in high school, this is what I was doing, college, now in my professional life, is a really good indicator of how you're growing and changing. And by the way, we're always growing and changing. Every
Mm-hmm.
time you hit a new limit and you want to go above
Mm.
that, a different money trigger,
Yep.
whether it's shame or guilt, something's going to bubble up to the surface. And I think that's just a way to celebrate your awareness more so than falling into the judgment mode of
Mm.
this means I'm not evolved or doing it the right way. It's like, no, just take that as a little sign that you're growing, you're changing. That's a beautiful thing.
Oh, I love it, Shannon. Such good insight and wisdom and knowledge, and so many good takeaways from the show today. Thank you so
Good.
much for being here.
Of course. It was my pleasure. I loved it.
Yay. Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah.